Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a replacement on my buddy's W211 E550. We're going to replace the air compressor and the valve block. So you can see you first just want to jack it up and take the wheel off. So once you got the wheel off, you pretty much just want to look at these clips and bolts that are here. This car is missing a little bit of its hardware. I'll probably put some of that back on when I'm done, but you can see that there's some at the top, some at the bottom, and they are 10mm size and 8mm size. So there's some more up there. There's actually another clip down here that you just want to be careful on. And once you get all those out, you can pull that whole front half of the liner out, and you'll pretty much be able to see this. You'll just want to disconnect these lines. You can see there's two 10mm bolts holding that valve block onto a bracket, and then you can see the air compressor is just connected with looks like two connectors and some 10mm bolts. There's two in the front right here, and then there's one kind of up under there in the back you'll be able to feel for. So basically want to disconnect these lines. They're just going to be a 10mm wrench. And there's just those two bolts that I was showing you earlier on the right side. You just want to crack those loose, and you pretty much just screw them out by hand from there. The heads of the lines are also 10mm, so you should be able to just use that same wrench to unscrew those air fittings. And once you get those lines out, you want to disconnect the connectors at the bottom. You can do it in really any order you want, but usually if it hasn't been worked on before, you can still see the colors of the lines, but you just want to make sure you know where the lines go, where you took them off. They have colors like green, blue, orange, brown, and like yellow that show you where they're supposed to plug in on that valve block. So once you get that final line off, you just want to start disconnecting the air compressor itself. It has two bigger connectors on it, and you can pretty much leave like that little hose connected to it, but then you just want to make sure that the air filter and the intake line comes off from its mount, and be sure to not lose that rubber mount of where the other end sits. But those nuts are just a 10, so you want to pull those out with, you can do it by hand if you like, but I like to use like a drill with a 10mm swivel head on it. Just makes the job go faster. And once you can locate them, you can really get the job going easily. You shouldn't have to take off the front lower shield. It should be simple enough to do without that. So once you get that 10 off right here on any of those, you basically want to take the spring and its holder off, which will be right on the other side. And then behind the boot there will be a washer that keeps it from going too high, and you want to keep all that stuff and put it in the right order. So it goes in this order. You put the washer, and then the spring, and then the holder or the guide, and then the nut. And so you just zip that 10 off for each of the three places. And once you do that, make sure you have all your parts. There it is again. And then you're pretty much clear, and that's how you get it all out. So here's where you want to swap the parts from the old one to the new one. Whether or not you're using a new compressor to put in or used one, this is pretty much where you'll want to get a like the intake hose and filter, or say like this line I'm taking off, which is one of the lines that goes to the valve block from the compressor, and then of course inspect it for damage or anything. So now we can put the replacement compressor in the car, and we're basically just going to do the reverse order. So once we get it kind of lined up, we can grab a washer and then put it on there, and then we're going to put that spring and holder in place, and then that nut just a couple of threads so that we can get the other ones seated. And this is the only way that you can install those without getting noise or something from the compressor when it's running. This particular setup with the spring and everything makes it so that you don't hear it rattling around. It kind of absorbs all the shock of the compressor when it's running. So once those are tight, we can pretty much just plug in our electrical connectors. We can look and make sure that they're clear of any corrosion or debris, and you can blow them out if you need. But there's just 2 electrical connectors for the compressor again, and there's just 2 for the valve block. So now we can go ahead and install the valve block. Basically just put it on there and start threading in our lines. If you have a new one, then you would install them by just removing the white cap and taking those old fittings off the lines, and you would just need to push it into those caps are on a new valve block. But here I'm just going to reuse the old ones and thread them in. Of course, I'll inspect them to make sure that they're not broken or anything. So now you can plug your valve block connectors. There's 2 of them once you've got it mounted and your lines tightened down. Basically, after that, just want to take your air inlet line for the air compressor and kind of mount it. You can see that there's this little holder that you just push it into, just like this. And then that little tab sticking off the end goes into the fascia, the front bumper, in this spot. Hopefully you looked where it was, but it's just this little tiny part it just plugs into. But you can also see here that it kind of was just dangling around. So I basically found that the little boot that covers the filter that I'm pulling off was broken on its mounting point that little hooks onto this little hook behind the valve blocks bracket. And I basically just took the one off the old one and put it on, and so I could get that to sit securely so it's not like banging around while I'm driving or while the compressor is in operation. So when it is fully installed, it should look be at more of an angle, but you can just put your hose back on, put your clamp back on, and just hook it on this little black tab. It should look more like this. It should be a lot more secure. So basically, once we're done with that, we can go ahead and put the wheel liner back in. You can add any missing hardware and just make sure that this tab goes in first. Seems to be the easiest way. And then you want this to go behind the rear half of the shield. Sometimes a little difficult to get in there, but that's how it's supposed to be installed. So once the liner is all secured, you got all your fasteners down, we can go ahead and put the wheel back on and wrap it up and check our operation. Of course, these are hub-centric wheels, so what I find easiest to get them on is you kind of lift them and set them on there. You put a lug nut into the socket and just kind of twist the wheel without the rotor moving until it drops into place, and you should be able to get it on and tighten down pretty quickly. Then we can go ahead and take a scanner like this one. I'm using the AUTEL MP808, which is a Maxi Pro. Works pretty well, does lots of actuations and data readings. So I basically take my cable, take the scanner, go over to the car, and we can try and see the compressor's performance. You probably want to do this especially if you're using a used one that you don't know its quality or how good it's doing. Your Obd port is right here next to the red hood latch, hood release that is, and so we can just unlock it, and once we're all connected, we'll just go to Mercedes-Benz, and then a lot of these scanners have the auto detect feature, so we can pretty much just select auto select. It'll just read the VIN for us, and then we will get on in there, select left hand drive, and then we'll just skip the quick test and go straight to the suspension, the AIRMATIC module. And once it loads, we can basically go into the pneumatic test, and there's a specific test. Yeah, chassis, suspension. There's a test for the compressor on its own. So yeah, it's actually not going to be under active test. It'll be under the other section, and you can see there it basically just says that it'll run the compressor for a certain amount of time after releasing all the pressure, and it'll see if it can get between specified bar within a specified time. Now this compressor is pretty much rocking and rolling. The old one would run for the max amount of time and not even get to 11. I think it was just under 12 bar. And so you can see this one's going well over 20 very quickly. It's not like in the best shape. It's not like hitting, closer to the 30 psi, 30 bar range like some do. But this is more than sufficient for what we were looking to achieve. So